Good evening, everyone. It is 5 o'clock, and I will call the meeting to order. One important item I will start with. Just want to take a moment to acknowledge the loss of an important individual in our community. Mr. Don Lund passed away over this weekend, and just want to let his wife Deanna and Greg and Jason and the entire Lund family know that the entire community is mourning with you, and we appreciate all of the substantial contributions that he and the entire Lund family have made to our community. So let's just take a moment and remember on some more positive times with Don. Thank you. I received a call from Councillor Jacobson, and he will not be joining us this evening, I don't believe, so we're down one. Is there any items that we want to alter for the agenda this evening? Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, all those in favor? Thank you. And our minutes from June 24th, previous meeting. Anybody have any items on that? Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I did notice actually at the very end on page 6 that it's, I know I passed a lot of motions that last meeting, but there is one that I'm pretty sure that I did not, because I had left the meeting prior to. So the moved by Councillor Hibbs that Council returned to an open meeting at 8:27. That would have been impossible as I left 7 minutes prior to that. So
Very good, thank you. And so was it someone else that made the motion then, or the time was off, or what's?
It wasn't me that made the motion, so it was somebody else that made the motion.
Very good, we'll have the online or the video reviewed and make sure that they're corrected. Councillor Hoekstrom.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I know that there was another citizen who spoke to us that night, and that person has not been identified. I know she didn't identify herself during the meeting, but somehow she wasn't recorded as being present or that she spoke to us.
I will certainly have administration look into that and see if there was a reason why her name was omitted. If not, we will see that it is added. And I don't have the exact location in the minutes. I didn't like the wording on the motion for the outdoor patio. I thought that it didn't really capture the intent of it. If we could just, so it reads there that council approved the application for a seasonal patio in front of 5021 50th Street. I think that portion is correct, but what was omitted was the 5 parking stalls, and because I'm on the against side, it was the 5 stall portion. It was not the seasonal patio part that I was speaking against, so I would like that added to those so it's a more clear picture. That information added to the motion itself so that people understand what that was for. Councillor Hoekstrom?
But that wasn't my motion.
Was not?
No, it was not. My motion was just that we would approve the patio as is, because I remember that discussion that you prompted me to add the, I know what you're saying, because I voted against other motions too, and it wasn't the whole motion that I was against, it was how it was worded, but that was my motion as I worded it that night.
Okay, and it was as it was worded, not as it was worded in the recommendation from administration.
It was as what was presented.
It was as was presented by the administration in the memo, and it did not highlight the parking stalls. Because
Okay, very good. I appreciate you acknowledging that, and certainly we'll have that checked out and make sure that they're accurate, but thank you.
Sorry.
Anything else? Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. There's nothing else, so I would go ahead and move that we adopt the minutes as amended, I guess, or planned to be amended.
Very good. Nothing further on that item? All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you. So this evening we've got a presentation on behalf of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, CAP as it's known. We have Mr. Chris Montgomery. I would ask you to come forward now. And as you well know, our meetings are public and are recorded and streamed live as well, so I'll have you use the microphone. When your microphone's light is on, you're live and ready to go, but you are, so the floor is yours.
Okay, very good. So first of all, thank you for having me up. My name is Chris Montgomery. I've run a community and stakeholder engagement program with CAP for the last 5.5 or so years. And so wanted to take the opportunity to come up here and talk to you guys a little bit about what's going on in the industry. I also recognize that there's, last year or so, there's been some early development of what we call the East Duvernay. It's much deeper resource, and that type of development is a lot more intense than, historically what the oil and gas industry has looked like. So I know that's created some concerns in certainly the rural parts of the region. And although I don't address it directly in my presentation, I do want to offer that if you have similar concerns, I would certainly like to hear what those are and how that kind of development is impacting your community as well. So, I'm here to have kind of an open dialogue despite, the presentation that I'm giving as well. I'll just ask that, thanks. So for those of you who aren't familiar with CAP, as our name kind of suggests, we represent oil and gas producers in Canada. We have about 60 to 70 members today, and they produce about 80% of all of Canada's oil and natural gas. And so we have everything from small, independent, privately held companies here in Alberta up to the big multinationals that you get your gasoline from at the pump. Next slide. So I always like to start my presentations with this slide. This represents a forecast from the International Energy Agency from 2017 about what future demand for energy around the world looks like. And this scenario presumes that every country in the world that has made commitments and policy changes underneath the Paris Climate Accord meets those obligations. So even under that scenario, fossil fuels are going to be the predominant form of energy around the world, with oil growing a little bit and significant growth around the world occurring in natural gas. And so for us as CAP, the question isn't whether or not this energy demand is going to be met. The question is where the energy demand is met from. And in our view, we can develop like-for-like resource, the best resources in the world when it comes to fossil fuels, and that we not only would reap economic benefits of developing those fuels, but we would actually provide environmental benefit as well, because we can produce that oil and natural gas at a lower emission than other places in the world. So for us, market access, which I'll talk about later, is not just about meeting our economic needs, but it's also providing an environmental good around the world as well. So next slide. Of course, as you all know, the energy sector in Canada is facing significant challenges, primarily because we can't access markets. And our oil pipelines are full, and we have significant challenges in our natural gas markets as well. And so despite the fact that we've been in a so-called recovery since 2016 around the world when it comes to oil and natural gas resources, Canada continues to struggle. And so this will actually be the second year in a row where we see a decline in capital investment in the sector. So 2019 is going to be a pretty difficult year. The oil sands have been facing reduced capital investment for 6 years now. Conventional sector has been a little bit better off. But if we were to take this graph out to 2014, in 2014, we invested as a sector $81 billion worth of capital into the Canadian economy. This year, we're estimating that will be around $37 billion. So we're less than half of where we were just a few short years ago. Next slide. Of course, most of our capital goes into drilling wells. Last year, we drilled around 6,100 wells in Western Canada. About 3,300 of those were here in Alberta. This year, we're expecting a decline that matches that decline in capital investment, and so we expect around 5,500 wells to be drilled in the province this year, or sorry, in Western Canada this year, and about 2,700 or so here in Alberta. Next slide. Just want to talk a little bit about crude prices. We saw a significant decline in pricing over the course of the fall. And that was happening around the world, but it was exacerbated here in Canada because our pipelines are full. And so that was creating a false oversupply in the market above and beyond what we saw in world markets here in the province. And of course, the province stepped in and put in place what we call curtailment, but essentially that's a cap on our oil production out of the province. And that's how they closed that differential and stabilized prices in the province. Obviously, that's not an ideal situation. What we would prefer is that those price concerns would have been closed through the construction of pipelines and additional capacity to markets, and allow the markets to sort that thing out. Unfortunately, we're just not in that position. And the province would have seen a period of several months probably if they didn't step in, where they simply wouldn't have collected royalties from the sector. It would have had a significant impact on their budget. If they were allowed that situation to continue. So they stepped in, and that's kind of where we stand today. That curtailment's still in place. It's slowly being eased as other market factors start to come into play. But as I say, not an ideal situation. Next slide.
Chris?
Yep.
Curious, on the bottom of that graph, there's the WTI premium.
Yep.
That stands for which?
So WTI NYMEX, that's, oh, sorry, I see what you're saying, on the gray scale on the bottom. So that represents the discount for Western Canada Select, which is our heavy crude here in Alberta, so oil sands mostly, compared to WTI, which is Texas prices for light crude. There's always a bit of a discount there, but as you can see in the fall, it was blowing out substantially. And that's had an impact on our rail economics as well. I know certainly in rural parts of the province, the shipment of oil by rail is of concern, and rightly so. We were seeing a dramatic increase in rail shipments in the fall as well. With that curtailment, it really doesn't allow for rail economics to work in the same way, and so those crude shipments have fallen off quite dramatically to more normal levels in the last few months. Next slide. So just in sum, the first part of this slide basically captures what I've said already. The long-term solution is really building additional pipeline capacity. Unfortunately, the three projects on the book are all facing challenges or have faced challenges. So Enbridge Line 3 down to Chicago, the Canadian part of that pipeline has been built, but is facing regulatory challenges in the United States. Keystone XL has overcome its recent challenges in the US. TransCanada, or TC Energy now, has yet to take an FID on that. Presumably will sometime soon, but they have said that they're going to miss the 2019 construction season for sure. And Trans Mountain, of course, faced defeat in the federal court in British Columbia. The federal government has responded to that, reapproved the project after additional NEB concerns around orcas off the coast and redoing their Indigenous consultation. So, but again, all three of those pipelines, which ought to have been in service by now, they're all going to miss 2019 certainly. Some will be in construction, but oil certainly won't be flowing in 2019, and likely 2020, 2021 at the earliest. Next slide. Our gas producers, kind of a similar but different story. Gas prices have been challenged in the province really since 2018 and have been facing overall declines since 2008. Sorry. What this chart doesn't show, because it's monthly average prices, is that gas prices in the province have seen pretty dramatic swings up and down, and that volatility in prices makes it very difficult for producers to plan their business operations. And so we see AECO prices fluctuating sometimes by more than $1 when the average price is under $2. The other thing it doesn't show is that we have had periods of time in the last 3 years, including recently, where natural gas prices are actually in the negative. And so that means producers are having to pay people to get rid of their natural gas. So it's effectively a byproduct. And so what's happening there is parts of the country that are developing what we call liquids-rich natural gas, all of their value is in the liquids, because those liquids are certainly priced higher, and their demand and price is tied more closely to oil than it is to natural gas. So those producers in those places are allowed to continue to produce gas no matter what the price is and just dump it on the market. But the consequence of that is that if you're in regions of the province with dry gas, it really destroys the economics of your business, particularly in southern Alberta, but other parts of the province too with legacy gas assets. And so that's driving concerns around those assets and what the future of them look like. We don't want them shut in prematurely, but at the same time, the economics are very, very challenged. So next slide. So like oil, the long-term solution is for us to access new markets through the building of liquefied natural gas facilities on the west coast of British Columbia. And we've seen some positive developments there of late, but again, these projects take some time. They're facing some public opposition in key spots that will need to be overcome, but hopefully in the coming years we'll see that new industry finally develop. The other thing I would note is that the conversion of coal to gas-fired electricity is a significant positive for gas producers in the province. That represents a potential of about 800 MCF a day, so it's not insignificant for the sector. Next slide. Next slide. So just talk to you briefly about some of the things we're working on federally and provincially. Two high-profile pieces of legislation that passed the Senate this fall have now received royal assent. Bill C-69 fundamentally reworks the environmental assessment process in Canada, and in our view to the detriment of the oil and gas sector, but also other sectors that want to build large infrastructure. It creates a lot more uncertainty in the process. The Senate proposed several amendments to that bill, many of which we felt would actually make the bill workable. We could live with the legislation with those amendments in place. Unfortunately, the federal government rejected those, and the House Commons rejected those, and so this fundamentally makes it much more difficult to build large-scale projects in the country on a go-forward basis. The other piece of legislation, Bill C-48, is the tanker ban. So that would ban the export of certain crudes off the northern coast of British Columbia, so basically from the northern tip of Vancouver Island up to the Alaska border. In our view, that is just not sound policy. It restricts our ability to reach Asian markets in the future, and just frankly is not based off of science. If we can ship these products into the country elsewhere or out of the country elsewhere, we can certainly ship it safely off the northern coast of British Columbia as well. The last piece I'll touch on federally is around the Clean Fuel Standard. So we've put a lot of effort into dealing with climate policy in all jurisdictions across the country. The federal government has been no exception. They have their price on fuel with equivalency on things like methane emissions and other policies here in Alberta. Didn't have a large impact, but the Clean Fuel Standard essentially to us is an additional carbon tax on what we already pay. So under the Clean Fuel Standard, anybody who's burning fuel has to bring certain things in to make their fuel cleaner in order to avoid pricing. When we're developing oil and gas resources out in the bush, it's just frankly impossible to do things like inject renewable natural gas into your gas plant. And so, the result will be the industry pays more. And again, if we have effective carbon policy that drives down our emissions, shutting in production because of increased cost here in Alberta doesn't help anyone. We have the cleanest, or some of the cleanest natural gas in the world. If we're providing that and we're displacing higher emitting sources around the world, we're providing environmental benefit. But if we're meeting our climate change obligations by shutting in production, we're actually not helping. So that's our main concern. Next slide. Provincially, we're in significant conversations with the government around their red tape reduction program. Our hope is, and we'll see where it goes, that they're not focused on just reducing things like word counts and stuff like that. That they're actually making meaningful differences to the regulatory system in the province. We've proposed a number of measures to them, and we work closely with them, hopefully, in the months down the road, that will pay some dividends for the sector and make us a lot more competitive with respect to other jurisdictions. Municipal taxes rurally is of concern to us significantly. Again, it's one of the operating costs that operators can't control themselves. And so we would certainly like some pressure downward on those. It's not a concern for us in the cities and towns, of course. We don't have a lot of assets in place there. But on our pipelines and our facilities, it's a significant concern, again, particularly for dry gas producers. And our concerns there are mostly around the way assets are depreciated over time. We don't feel that that provides a realistic picture of what those assets are worth today, for those legacy assets in particular, and then how they're assessed as well. So those are two areas of concern there. And then the third area where we're putting a lot of work in is around end of life of assets, so closure liability and orphan wells. Making sure that we have in place a system that effectively encourages companies to take care of their liabilities and shut those wells in appropriately, take them off the landscape when they've reached the end of their life, and then making sure that we have a healthy orphan well fund to take care of those assets that don't have an owner. So I think I'll leave it there and happy to take any questions you may have.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I always wondered why we don't, Central Canada is buying billions of dollars of oil from the Middle East.
Yep.
Why we haven't lobbied or advocated for a pipeline, and I know Quebec doesn't want pipelines, but couldn't there have been a partnership between Alberta and Ontario to have a refinery there, pipeline the product to them, collaborate more there?
Yeah, certainly, Energy East from TC Energy was on the books for a number of years. We certainly advocated very strongly for that. It would have taken crude to refineries in out east. We do have refineries in Ontario and Quebec that are supplied now with much more Canadian crude because of some pipeline reversals that were done close to 10 years ago, I think now. It may have been less. But yeah, I mean, from an economic perspective, certainly makes a lot more sense to provide Canadians out east with Western Canadian oil than it does getting it offshore from places like Algeria or wherever. So, I agree with you.
Councillor Goldson.
That was my same question regarding Energy East, but I also have some questions regarding the Indigenous application to purchase the pipeline.
Yep.
Have we been doing any lobbying to support that?
CAP hasn't been directly. Our main concern is, getting the pipe in the ground and making sure the project is built. Less of concern to us is who owns it in particular. But, I would say that, our sector is committed to Indigenous reconciliation in the ways that we can help that along from an economic standpoint. It would seem to make some sense. But ultimately, that will have to be a decision of the federal government. They've indicated they don't want to own the thing for very long, so just leave it there.
So I was curious, I didn't see CAP being represented at the recent... Sorry about that, a little feedback here going on.
Yep.
That's better, sorry for the feedback. I didn't see CAP represented at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities of Quebec City. I'm just curious if that was waiting for an invitation request or just a conscious decision not to go. What was the issue?
Yeah, so we were there. We had some folks that were working a booth in conjunction with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and some other people floating around as well. The other thing we did there is we supported AUMA and the other municipal associations in the West in their resource coalition I can't remember the exact term they used. We were there at the table as part of those discussions, supporting them in the work that they were doing at FCM. We've had a challenging relationship as CAP with FCM. So we, weren't there on our own per se, but we were certainly there, with others.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Pretty easy crowd tonight.
Yeah.
Great.
Good.
We appreciate your time and coming and speaking with us, Chris.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Like I said, just jump down to that next item just to accommodate Mr. Montgomery's schedule. So we'll go back to council mailbox and go through those items. Is there some items under the report from Lacombe Regional Tourism? Some questions or comments anyone has? If not, I don't think we're going to go through the entire report unless someone has some input. The next one up was the minutes from the May 16th meeting of the Lacombe Police Commission. Anything there? And then some minutes from the May 21st meeting of the Lacombe District Recreation Parks and Culture Board. Everybody must have had a long weekend or something. How about from the May 21st meeting minutes of the North Radio Regional Wastewater Services Commission? Any questions there? Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I had a question just under the note of next meeting. It says the next meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 17th in the City Council chambers and June 17th in the City Council chambers. So I was wondering, just a comment?
I'll let our CEO comment, but I think that was mostly a recording error.
It is, we have invites out for the next meeting to all the board members, and we'll certainly make that correction.
It's set for 15th, is it not? Yes,
Given that our meetings are public, I think the next special meeting has been set for July 15th here at Director Thompson looked that up, but it's on the 15th, I believe, anyway.
9 a.m.
At 9 a.m.? Thank you. I don't expect there will be a flood of attendees at City Hall, but certainly an option if citizens choose to participate. Or I'm sorry, not participate, but be in the gallery rather. See it, go ahead.
So actually, that is the regional water meeting that's on the 15th, that you're referring to. The regional sewer meeting, I think, not to add confusion here, but do you know what the date is? Is set in September, and that board has been notified as well.
Regional water, regional wastewater, my error, sorry about that. Any additional questions with respect to Regional Wastewater Commission? And then there was a letter in there for alternatives to fireworks. Any questions or comment on that? Councillor Gibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm assuming that a response will, of course, go back to the lady that wrote this. I did click on the link, and it was a very interesting article. However, I did make note that while some communities had attempted to get away from fireworks, they ended up ultimately going back in a lot of cases. So that was curious. I think it is important that we are aware of the impact that fireworks may have on the community. But yeah, I just would be curious, I guess, as to what Edmund will be responding. That I'm assuming at this time we are anticipating no changes to our current program.
Yep, that's exactly, unless we get different direction this evening, of course, that would be our response.
let Councillor Ross respond to that, given his heavy involvement with Lacombe Days and therefore the fireworks displays during that time period.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. In light of the cost of fireworks, we as Lacombe Days community tried the light show last year. And it was, in fairness to people having patience of us trying to explore a different option, strongly because of the cost. There was a lot of responses of people asking for the fireworks back, a lack of wow factor of entertainment value. So in light of that, we've pursued the fireworks returning for Lacombe Days, and hopefully with a bigger show, because we have taken it upon ourselves to be licensed individually to have group together to, therefore it gives us an option to buy more fireworks and us provide the labor. So we did try an option. There was a lot of feedback of the citizens wanting it back because it was, the light show was just not a wow factor. So, and yes, I do respect that there are some concerns of people with their pets, that it is a concern. And we were trying to make a more public awareness for people to contain their pets during that evening, because it's obviously with the dogs and so forth. So we've made an effort in both those ways. So
That's kind of interesting that an alternative form of entertainment was tried, and not unlike the findings that you spoke about, Councillor Hibbs, that they seem to find their way back in the community. So obviously it's a wanted form of entertainment. So I for one look forward to them on Lacombe Days. Councillor Hoekstra, did you have a comment as well?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I just am trying it now too. I couldn't find the article, so I was just thinking that maybe a citizen couldn't find the article. So I just thought if there could be clarification about how to find the article.
That's a great suggestion, because quite honestly, I had searched for it and I could not find the article as well.
I just Googled the title.
There we have it. Perhaps try Googling the title and not using the direct link. You might be better off. Any other comments on that particular letter? Seeing none, we'll move on to the commercial safety rest area from the Lacombe County. Obviously, you'll understand from the letter there that we're not interested in pursuing this item further. And after the assurances that we had from our MLA, which I would suggest differed slightly in the communication that we've had from the province, but since how we have those assurances, I'm not necessarily sure that council is interested in pursuing the matter much further either. So unless I hear different. Any comment on that item? And Fairway Drive sidewalks. That letter. If not, I think that's all of the mailbox items that there were, unless anybody has anything to add in closing. We can certainly entertain a motion. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I move that we accept the mailbox as information.
Thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. We're going to pass over one item for a few moments here, move on to our second page of business, and go down to the operations and planning services item presented by Mr. Phil Bevins and Manager Mitchell, I believe, over the design guideline updates. So if you would care to come forward. Phil, welcome. I don't know that you've been here before speaking, so as long as that red light's on, you're free to talk. So just give your button a push there, and your mic should light up.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor Creasy and Council. Manager Mitchell was going to be here to help introduce me to you, but I guess I'll take that role myself. I am Philip Bevins. I'm the Municipal Affairs intern that you so graciously approved a budget for. I live in Edmonton. I have a wife and 2 kids, expecting 1 more. And I have a diploma in architectural technology and most recently completed a bachelor's degree in technology management from NAIT in Edmonton. So I was also successful in applying to the municipal internship program. I am one of 16 applicants currently with host municipalities throughout Alberta. And part of the municipal internship program's goals is to allow for a wide variety of opportunities for interns to gain experience and hands-on learning about how municipalities work day to day. So this is my first time addressing a council. I've started reading the MGA, not through it yet, as you might not be too surprised to hear. But I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity to speak to you. So one of the projects, one of the biggest projects that we have in Lacombe during my internship is the 2019 Design Guidelines update. And just for your information, the design guidelines outline standards and practices when developing construction drawings and help guide development in Lacombe. The design guidelines have not received an extensive review since 2009, received miscellaneous updates in 2012, and has received additions only to the open parks and spaces section in 2017. There are examples that still show that another extensive review would be beneficial at this time. There are some references to legislative acts and policies that are out of date, and there's some references to regulatory bodies that are also out of date. And there are some gaps in procedure that have occurred due to Lacombe's growth over the years. The members of industry and consultants who help work and build Lacombe are the primary audience for the design guidelines, and one of the main goals of this project is to help these individuals and stakeholders get their work done more easily and help the ease of doing work in Lacombe and with Lacombe. Thus far, the administration has solicited 30 consultants, construction contractors, and developers, and have received 15 responses. These responses have helped lead administration to choosing a design guideline based on the city of Red Deer because of its familiarity to industry members in the region and because of its comprehensiveness as a document. So just to help outline the flow or the steps in this project, we've begun and we are in progress on information gathering. The next step is doing an internal review, getting input from each department within administration as far as updates and potential changes. The next step would be to work with a technical consultant, which there is budget allotted for this process. And then we would take these considerations and potential updates again to industry members, consultants, to both give them the information of upcoming and pending changes, and as well to offer another opportunity to provide input. We will then take all of these proposed changes, put them into a final draft of the design guidelines, and hope to present a fully vetted and updated version of the design guidelines for Lacombe to council in the first quarter of 2020. That is the end of my presentation, and I'd be glad to answer any questions if there are any forthcoming.
Just a little awkward moment of silence there to see if everyone's paying attention, but you realize there's an expectation that you'll move to Lacombe when this internship is over, right?
That is an expectation that I am fully aware of, and I would be happy to relocate myself and my family.
Well, I just want to wanted to thank you for coming before us. Obviously, you're familiar with the information. We appreciate you've obviously got some valuable experience and whatnot in this area. And judging by the look on your supervisor's face behind you, you passed the test. So I don't think that council has a bunch of questions, but we look forward to an updated document and hopefully one that will ease the relationship between our contractors and engineers and city administration. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much for your time, Council, and Mayor Creasy.
Councilor Connor.
I would so move we accept the report as information.
Thank you. Councilor Gullickson, were you
No,
same thing? Very good, thank you. Appreciate that. All those in favor? Thank you. Unanimous. And now we will move on to, if we have Planner Kirchner come on up. Under bylaws number 7, operations and planning services, we've got bylaw 400.23, our land use bylaw, with its updates to the amendments that we had for proposed third reading.
Excellent, so thank you. Hopefully this will be the last time we'll come to council to talk about this particular amendment. I believe this is round 4 on it. So very short and sweet. Administration took the items that were discussed at the last council meeting, so there's 6 proposed changes, and incorporated them into the newest draft that you see before you. So that was removing reference to the maximum accessory building height of 4.6 meters, removing the option of providing a 3-meter landscaping strip, proposing for all other districts that the minimum of 15% of the lot shall be landscaped, changing shall to should in regards to minimal landscaping requirements. In regards to the R4 district for buildings with 7 or more units, making the change from 25% to 20% for the minimum landscaping. And the last change was in regards to the discretionary use fitness facility in the heavy industrial district. Administration does have an alternative suggestion for this, and CEO Gowdy will discuss it in further details.
Thank you. So we did actually talk to our legal counsel about the proposal to add a fitness facility to the I-2 heavy industrial zone at second reading, and we're advised that that bylaw would be very subject to challenge and likely be overturned if there was such a challenge, just due to the fact that all of those areas that would be affected by that, so owners of I-2 property, owners of property adjacent to I-2 property, were never given any notification that this fairly significant change was potentially coming to the use of their property or their neighbor's property. And so to not have the ability to provide input on that would not be in keeping with the Municipal Government Act and our own bylaws. So what we've proposed instead is to add a site-specific amendment to allow the fitness facility, specifically the boxing club, at the location that it's been identified here at 4823 45A Street. We do think that there's still some difficulty with placing this use in an I-2 zone. However, the impact is significantly limited if you're maintaining it through a site-specific exemption. It's not likely to have an impact on other properties within the community. And so we think that that would be probably the best way to handle that within the confines of both the Municipal Government Act and our own land use bylaw.
And I'll add, we did take the liberty of circulating notification to all property owners within, it was a bit farther than the 16-meter circulation area for that property, to let them know that council would be hearing about this potential site exemption. That was sent on June 27th. I haven't heard anything back, but it's really hard to tell with Canada Post what kind of lag time you might get. But we took that due diligence so that there is a level of engagement with them and notification, so that it won't be a surprise if this is approved and a boxing club shows up next door.
Councillor Conick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Thank you to administration for delving into this a little further. I can understand the legal standpoint and respect that, certainly. But I do commend you for looking for an alternative, and I think this will work, is to do a specific site exemption and to get this club off the ground and have a crack at it, and I think it's terrific. And to that end, I'm actually prepared to make the motion already that we give third. This council give final reading to bylaw 400.23 with proposed change 5A as amended.
Thank you for that. So certainly, not only is it an alternative, I think it's a more appropriate alternative than including fitness facilities in an I-2 in general. I think it's problematic at best. So I think it's great that we're flexible enough to consider this somewhat unusual request. But I think it strikes a good balance between being open to some people that do some pretty excellent work for a variety of users that are in a position to need some assistance, and we're hopefully in a position to see that can happen. I was just curious with the chance for responses from individuals within that larger radius area. Is there a time frame when?
We didn't put a time frame. It was somewhat challenging because usually when we send a circulation like this, it's tied to a public hearing or alternatively a development permit being processed. So it was more of a, I guess, a notification as opposed to a attempt to gain feedback. Just with the time frame and really the fact that the public hearing portion has been completed for this bylaw. We haven't heard any feedback. If we heard anything that was of concern, we would have made sure to bring it forward. And we may or may not hear anything at this point, since it is site specific as opposed to a bigger potential impact to the neighbors.
I would like to think that if anybody did have any huge oppositions to it, we would have heard from it, and they wouldn't be waiting to send something in the mail. I'm sure we would have heard on the phone or in person. So there's several other proposed changes that were addressed in this third reading. Does anybody have any input on any of those, or anything with regard to this bylaw? Seeing none, I guess we're ready for a vote. All those in favor? None opposed. Thank you. Kirchner, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Manager Mitchell, would you care to come up and join us?
I would.
Go through the General Engineering Services selection results. I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and council. All right. So the memo before you outlines the process that we just completed for the General Engineering Services procurement process. This was completed in two parts. The first part was a fairly simplified process, which was a request for qualifications from various proponents. In this process, proponents were asked to indicate the range of services they offered, provide resumes for key team members, and include references that we could check. 7 firms submitted at this stage. 5 were appropriate and 3 were shortlisted. The shortlisted firms included ISL Engineering and Land Services, Morrison Hirschfield, and Stantec Consulting. Those 3 companies were then asked to proceed into Part 3, which included the submission of proposals for 3 separate projects. These projects were selected to be representative of the work that the consultants would complete under the General Engineering Services contract. The first project was the 2021 Capital Works Program. Capital Works programs are the programs we complete every year here in the city of Lacombe, and thus are a very good representation of the work that they would be doing. Project number 2 was the Fairway Drive sidewalk project. Even though this project is not going forward this year, we did ask the consultants to provide plans on how they would complete this project using some out-of-the-box thinking under some fairly tight deadlines and a fairly simplistic design but complex stakeholder management program. And then the third program was the Infrastructure Growth and Infill Needs Master Plan. This project would focus on long-term planning and include infrastructure model updates, asset management assessments, and consideration of off-site and redevelopment levies. All 3 consultants had excellent proposals, and any one of them would have probably done a great job for us. However, the selection team took a quantitative approach and ranked each of those proposals based on project cost, project understanding, methodology, project team, and corporate experience and qualifications, so similar work that they've done as a company. These scores can be seen on page 4 of the report. So based on the scoring received in both Part 1 and Part 2, Stantec had the highest score for both. And the kind of bullet point list of the reasons for that, especially in Part 2, are they had the lowest price for 2 out of 3 of the projects. Both the Capital Works program and the Fairway Drive were significantly lower in price. And then the Infrastructure Growth and Infill Needs Master Plan was competitive with the other consultants. Several members of their team have 10 or more years of experience working here in Lacombe, so that helped them rank very high for project understanding and methodology. They know our city and they know our issues. For project team, they also, not only did they use their experienced team members, but they also added a new team member to their team, which we were happy to see because that will bring new perspective and new ideas along with it. They were also the only consultant that had offices in Red Deer. And so for these reasons, administration recommends that council enter into a 3-year engineering services agreement with Stantec with provision for an additional 3 years. That being said, if we enter into a contract with them, that does not preclude us from going out to RFP for specific projects. And if we feel that there's a price benefit or experience benefit, we are more than willing and ready to do so. And this memo lists 7 recent projects in which we have done so in the recent past. As far as financial implications, the General Engineering Services Agreement has averaged about $1 million over the past 7 years. So it's a significant investment, and we think that Stantec will continue to provide us with a great service. Any questions?
Thank you for that outline. I'm just curious, who came up with the criteria for the planning and the evaluation process?
That would be a combination of Jordan and myself. Director Thompson and I had several meetings in which we discussed how we would score the various, both Part 1 and Part 2, as well as the various RFPs in Part 2. They were not all scored equally.
I appreciate that. I generally didn't know that, and if anybody's thinking that I was asking this, because I just think there's some rather unusual approach to some of this, and I want to commend you both on the way you went about this and proposing the various scenarios to the engineering firms. I just think I'm just not sure it's been done quite like this before, and I appreciate the change up to keep it people thinking fresh. And
I will say credit goes to CAO Gowdy, as this was a similar process to what we followed. What was it going on? 2012. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you had said that out of the shortlisted 3 firms which are identified in this report, there was 5 that were appropriately qualified.
Correct.
And so was it just too onerous to score the last two, or why three?
It's a lot of work for the consultant to put together those documents. I think I mentioned in here is something like 1,700 pages that we read through. So adding 2 more proponents would add a significant amount to that as well. But also for the proponents, they're more likely if they have a 1 in 3 chance to put together a really good proposal than if they have a 1 in 5 chance.
Very good, I appreciate that, thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a question, for example, if through budget deliberations, if the council decides to pursue with any other project, that doesn't affect like this agreement whatsoever, does it, or does it not? Like, for example, if we choose as council to want to pave the Len Thompson area, does that then affect this by just adding another project, or like if we want to pursue a project in 2020?
Yep. Councillor, Chief Covey?
No, these projects were just chosen as representative of sort of the type of work that we do. But for example, if you didn't go ahead with Fairway Drive, or you did add some new project, that's no problem. That's all considered within the sort of umbrella of the agreement.
And we would get a proposal before proceeding with the work. So and evaluate it, and if we felt fair value was given, proceed. If not, we can have that option to go into RFP.
And certainly any agreement in here does not preclude us, as you mentioned, from engaging another firm in any specific project, right?
Correct.
Okay. Satisfied?
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Hibbs, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just for clarity, so this would be a 3-year term contract with the option of an extension. When it comes to time for deciding whether that extension is exercised, I'm assuming that comes back to the council of the day then, or can you provide some clarity in that?
Sure, I'll turn this one over to Director Thompson.
So I think we can bring it back. It was council's direction to bring it back, but certainly our practice going forward would be that if we're feeling that Stantec's providing satisfactory service, then at the end of that term, that we would renew that contract for another 3 years, subject to any alternate direction of council today.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Seen this a few times in my time on council now, and Stantec consistently seems to come out on top, and for good reason. As it's cited in here, they are to the point where they're getting to know the city inside and out. And I know it was, when you have this transition, especially amongst directors and so forth, it doesn't hurt to have that kind of consistency at this level when you're dealing with this type of infrastructure. So, part of me thinks, because I'd asked Director Thompson over supper, there were some new engineering firms I had seen before. There's usually the usual players, but he said there were some name changes and this and that. But it's for good reason that Stantec keeps coming out on top through their knowledge base and their expertise. So at this point, at least, I am prepared to make the motion that council enter into a services agreement with Stantec Consulting for the purposes of general engineering services.
Thanks, Councillor Connick. Anyone have anything to add? Apparently not. All those in favor? Didn't see all the votes here, so I'll ask. Any opposed? It was unanimous. That's okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Manager Mitchell. Appreciate it. And while we're on unfinished business here, our CAO wants to take us through the updated 2018 through 2021 strategic plan.
So this is the second time you'll have seen these proposed changes, although this time they have been worked into the actual document. And so we have the 2019 to 2021 strategic plan for your adoption tonight. It incorporates all of the direction that was given at the last meeting, and barring any changes tonight, we think that it's ready to use as our work plan going forward.
Is there any significant changes that you wanted to highlight or adjustments made to it that you received since last meeting?
I didn't receive any proposed changes since the last meeting, so it is as presented with the additional items. We had 5 proposed changes to the priority ratings, and then 3 proposed additional items for consideration, which are included in the 2019 to 2021 strategic plan.
Thank you. Any comments or Councillor Clark?
The only comment I'd like to make is that we should really Photoshop Councillor Gullickson's glasses in, because he wears them all the time, he doesn't have them in his picture. That's all I'm saying.
That was a special.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Forgive me, I probably did not follow the appropriate process, but I briefly brought up last time of bringing forward the traffic study from the last quarter of 2021, because obviously there's the election in October. So then I didn't put forth the process of lowering one to put that forward. I didn't do my homework, I guess. Is that possible? The traffic study, I think it was.
Chief Cody?
It certainly is possible. If that's council's desire, we can look for adjustments that can be made in priority items if you'd like to see that advanced.
So for clarification, that study was currently deemed to be in the 3rd quarter?
So right now, that study is listed as a low priority item. It is scheduled for Q3 2021, and there would be a speed assessment, I believe, focused on some of the areas that we looked at in 2016, which would be Highway 2A, parts of Highway 12, and was there another location?
School zones, playground zones, and residential areas.
I guess, like a lot of these items, it's moving one higher priority is the easy part, is finding something else to adjust to counterbalance the workload. That's always the interesting one, but we'll keep that one under consideration and continue on with Councillor Kodak as well.
I was just going to echo those thoughts. I mean, I think it should stay where it is, and unless you can find something else to move, but I think it's fine where it's at.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess all due respect, it's something that can be demonstrated as a visual perception amongst the people back home that you've demonstrated some change within our term. I guess that was my thought. And I guess I apologize, I didn't forward an email of where one could be lowered to offset the workload. So that was just my thoughts as prior to the next election. I think that's an area of some people concerned. For example, 2A, it's been a 4-lane since improvement, and it's 50, and going through Black Falls, it's 60, and 2A through Panoka, 2A through Red Deer. I just think there's some expectations of some changes since there was a significant upgrade in 2A.
I think, I guess, just by the very nature, although it's listed as low priority, that doesn't mean it's not important to our community. It's just managing all of these various workload items that is the issue. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. My comment is just more of a global comment after I reread the document. There's a strike through on all the tasks that are completed, but I guess, is there a document somewhere that shows what happened when we completed these items? Like if there's, of course I was trying to find a good example of just that it shows what the project was that completed these items. Is there a more fleshed out document that kind of is a narrative that goes along with this?
I'm not sure if it's exactly what you're looking for, but at our last council meeting in June, we did attach a status update on all of those items, on all these strategic plan items, and so there was comments. Now, some of them may have been as simple a comment as completed in 2018, which is why if there is specific items you want a more thorough update on them, we can definitely do that.
Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just back to speed limits. I mean, you're talking about a study, comprehensive study of the whole community. But if we had a specific area or spot, we could make a motion to change those speed limits within those certain area, correct?
So if your motion is to lower the speed limits in those areas, yes. If your motion is to raise the speed limits in an area, no, I would not advise that council do that as a matter of public policy. That is something you should look at, an actual engineering assessment to see and talk to our police to see accident statistics and the mode of accidents and make sure you're not introducing some new risks for residents or pedestrians there. We did look at 10 specific areas in 2016 to see if there was some alignment in where people, citizens would want to see us take a closer look at that. And at that time, there was no support, or I think there was actually no clear identification of areas that the community would want to see changes. So we could definitely bring that back. I think we're actually working on a request for information that includes some of that information, so you'll see that actually right away. That work that was done in 2016 where we did look out, go out and look at those 10 different areas. But for sure, I would say if you're looking to increase speeds where there's a chance to increase the risk of drivers or pedestrians, that should be done in the context of experts making those recommendations rather than sort of us saying, well, we feel like it should be faster there.
Thank you for that. And we would do that notice of motion then on something like that? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would like to go ahead and make the motion, because I don't believe it's been made already, that council endorse the 2019-2021 strategic plan. I really do appreciate the amount of work that goes into, especially the timelining of these documents, because those priorities, there's a lot of them, and we've been working on this for a long time. I really appreciate the fact that we were able to add in a few, in particular the one about the open improvement tax. But I think that this information went out, we had our opportunity, this is the time to move this so we can move on. They're all priorities, they're all different levels, and like I said, it is a balancing act to try and schedule that out. There's only so much staff, there's only so much they can achieve within a certain month, within a certain half year, within a certain year. So I would definitely support it as presented, and therefore making the motion.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. And I echo what the efforts that the administration was doing. But I look at some of the, for example, one of the strategies, create a plan for underperforming city property. And I'll acknowledge that actually that administration has been doing that ever since we've been elected on many different examples, and yet target time was Q1 of 2020. So, like, I completely recognize and appreciate, but some of these cities, the administrations have been working on some of these ever since we were elected in a ongoing process, I guess. So that's what I was just kind of, and I recognize the efforts you have to stay on a timeline. You'd love for them to get all to be done, but it just will never happen. It's just unrealistic. So, and I guess at some later time it can be discussion if you want to address something and move something forward with a notice of motion, I'm assuming. So I'm flipping something if it's later date, but I just want to bring attention that there's several things that administration's been working on ever since we're elected, and it's been a process in as far as dealing with the properties. So, but I do realize you can't have everything we want, but I guess it can be addressed as a notice of motion later. Thank you.
I think we also need to remember that this is a process we do each and every year, so this is a flexible working document that is updated continually, so if there's additional changes, one being the traffic speed study that you feel is important, it's not like it goes away, you can certainly bring it back. And if there's specific items that you would care to address, certainly entertain those as well, so. Anybody else before we vote? So we've got a motion before us, everybody's clear on that? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. And under new business, we'll just start with the first one on the list there, the proposed alternate board member for the North Red Deer Regional Wastewater Services Commission. Member CAO, take us through that.
For council this evening is a request to designate an alternate director from the members of council to represent the city of Lacombe on the North Red Deer Regional Wastewater Services Commission. This is a board that actually only has 3 members, and so what we ran into is that when one member is absent, yes, you still have quorum with 2 remaining, but it makes for some interesting meetings where you hope everything is unanimous or whether there's problems. So we looked into our bylaws. There is the ability to name an alternate who can attend during times of absence of the main member, and that member has all the same voting rights and powers as the main member. So with that, I guess we're looking for someone that's interested. This has only come up maybe once to twice a year in the past. And we would certainly be willing to sit down for as long as needed before any meeting where you're attending to make sure you're well versed in the subject at hand. But we are looking for someone who would be interested in attending those meetings as an alternate.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's just a situation where things do happen. You've got conflicting calendars when you can't make it, so it'd be nice to have a backup. And I think both our other members, in fact, do have alternate members, if I remember serving correctly. So I think it would be a good idea. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a quick question. I would be interested, as long as it's a daytime meeting. I believe they are daytime meetings, correct? Yeah.
Yes, they are. They
Okay.
usually follow regional water, so they're around 10:30.
Sure. So I am flexible in my daytime, so if unless somebody else is dying to do it, I am available.
Very good. Councillor Hoekstrom.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I was just wondering if we could have clarification around the motions. Why are there 2 motions at the top? There are 2, I guess, but what's the difference between 1 and 2?
So just the way the bylaws read is that there's a nomination, and then that nomination is appointed by council. So I think it could be 1, but it has just been presented as 2.
Certainly the end result is the same, but all right, is there any other interested individuals? If not, I would ask that someone nominate Councillor Hibbs.
I'll nominate Councillor Hibbs as the alternative.
Thank you very much. You want me to do what you tell us what to do? Very good. Councillor Connick, do you have something?
No, I was just gonna maybe throw my hat in the ring, have an election, but no, it's good. Do some campaigning.
All those in favor of that nomination? Very good. And keeping in mind with, just to alleviate any concerns over our bylaws, the way that they read there, then the second portion is for the alternate director. Councillor Connick.
I also make that motion and that we appoint Councillor Hibbs as an alternate director for the North Red Deer Regional Water Services Commission.
So you're giving up the election already? Okay, very good. Very good. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Councillor Hibbs. Like I said, I don't think it would be a real onerous one, but it's nice to have that backup just in case, so thank you. Appreciate you stepping forward. Thank you. Director Thompson, under Transportation Services, we got the rail safety assessment. You care to take us through that one?
Thank you, Mayor Chrissy. I'm actually going to invite Manager Mitchell up to the front. She's going to take us through the report done by Watt Consulting Group regarding the accurate rail crossings throughout the pump.
Thank you, Director Thompson. So as we were just talking about the strategic plan, this is one of the items that was a part. It was identified as a medium priority, originally identified for completion in 2018. However, after an RFP process in November of 2018, Watt Consulting was awarded the work, and it was contingent upon consultation with Canadian Pacific Rail. Unfortunately, we were not able to schedule an appointment with CP until Q2 of 2019. So we've recently completed that, and Watt has submitted this final report. So as a brief overview, there are two main rail lines in the city of Lacombe. The Bretcher line parallels Highway 12 and has two crossings on it. They're identified by blue in the picture above, and they're at Wolf Creek Drive and 34th Street. The Leduc line parallels Highway 2A and has three crossings within the city limits, and those are at Wolf Creek Drive, 50th Ave, and 46th Ave. There are also three additional crossings which are actually located in the county but are heard within the city, and those are located at 34th Street north of the city, and then at Range Road 270 and Range Road 270A. So Watt completed both a safety assessment and also a review of whistle cessation requirements. The safety assessment was the items that are required to meet the 2021 safety requirements outlined by Transport Canada. And so they've identified those separately from those required for whistle cessation. Watt found that 3 out of 5 crossings required only minor remedial measures such as new signage or line painting to meet the 2021 safety and whistle cessation requirements. However, there are 2 rail lines within the city of Lacombe that require more comprehensive changes. The first one is 50th Ave. This is a crossing on the Leduc line. And so this is the skewed crossing by Tim Hortons. One of the major safety items that was highlighted is that on occasion, right now we have a stop line both before the rail tracks and after the rail tracks, and on occasion there are vehicles that stop on the rail tracks, and so it was highlighted that needs to be addressed for both whistle cessation and safety. It's a high priority item. And then other items for that set of tracks were the sidewalk. Right now it's kind of painted as a zigzag line across the tracks, I think trying to hit them at 90-degree crossings, but it is a longer path, and so to straighten out the sidewalk would require coordination with CP because we'd have to remove some of their infrastructure to be able to do that. This was discussed at the meeting and they are also on board with that. And then the third major item for that would be extending the fence on the Tim Hortons property that's to the east. Right now, pedestrians are kind of shortcutting, and when they shortcut, they miss seeing the flashing lights in the rail arms come down. They kind of come in behind it. I kind of tried to illustrate it in those pictures there. So those are kind of the major ones that were identified at the 50th Ave. And then for Wolf Creek Drive crossing, this is the one on Bretcher line, so it's the one that is on Highway 12. There are 2 options to bring this crossing into compliance. Right now, it's only marked with rail crossing signs. So the first option is relatively simplistic, and that's just to install a stop sign. However, we were advised that if we bring it into compliance with the 2021 safety requirements, we are no longer eligible for funding for whistle cessation. Transport Canada does not consider whistle cessation as a high priority item. But if we were to take the second option, which is the much more expensive option to bring this one into compliance, that would be to install flashing lights, bells, and gates. And that would also do the same thing as the stop sign in bringing it into safety compliance, but it would also help us with whistle cessation on that particular crossing. For the 3 crossings just outside of city limits, the county had already completed safety assessments, so Watt reviewed those and then also completed a site visit where they just did a high-level review of what they figured would be required for whistle cessation. The 34th Street crossing up by Highway 2A was just recently upgraded. I think it was completed in 2016. I want to say 2016, and so it is to the new standards, and no remedial measures would be required. For Range Road 270, the county was actually in the process of updating that in November, and so once that project is complete, which I assume is complete now actually, no remedial measures will likely be needed. There were some comments that Watt made in regards to sign distances that may or may not have been completed as part of the county's upgrade. And Range Road 270A would require installation of flashing lights and bells to achieve whistle cessation, which is not something that the county is considering at this time. So as far as financial implications go, Table 1 on page 5 outlines the costs for the safety requirements, which are dictated by Transport Canada and must be completed by 2021, as well as the whistle cessation requirements. It should be noted that the Leduc line is the much more busier of the two lines. The Bretcher subdivision is rated as having less than 3 trains per day. CP does not designate anything less than 3, so it could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 0, it could be 1 every 2 weeks. And then the 2015 number, which were the most recent ones I was able to get my hands on for the Leduc line, was 12 trains per day. So 12 times 3, 36 train whistles on the Leduc line, less than 3 times 2, less than 6 on the Bretcher line. So I have compiled Table 1 and Table 2 separately so that we can have the cost implications for whistle cessation on the Leduc line only, as well as whistle cessation on the Bretcher line. It should also be noted that Transport Canada does have funding for safety improvements. As I noted before, whistle cessation is not considered, and there are 2 projects, one on the Leduc line, so the Tim Hortons crossing, which would be eligible for funding from Transport Canada, as well as cost sharing with CP Rail. And then the Wolf Creek Drive, should we decide to proceed with the flashing lights and bells, and it would be eligible for funding under Transport Canada as well as CP. So moving forward, there are several options. The first option is not to pursue whistle cessation, to simply accept this report as information, and then council will bring forward the safety requirement measures in the next for the next budget deliberations. Option 2, to pursue whistle cessation for the Leduc line only. This will reduce whistling heard within the city limits by approximately 85%, and is the lesser of the 2 costs. Option 3, to pursue whistle cessation for all crossings within Lacombe, so both the Bretcher and the Leduc line. And then option 4, that we also approach the county and see if they are willing to pursue whistle cessation for the 2 crossings that may be eligible and are heard within the city. I've also outlined the steps required for whistle cessation, just to curb expectations. This will not be an overnight process. We will have to proceed with the capital improvements first, and should we proceed with applying for grant funding, that could take a year as well. There is the option to proceed for grant funding after the work is complete, which might be applicable for the smaller projects, but not likely for the larger projects. And then after that, it's mostly a notification procedure. So we notify certain entities, such as unions and the like, that Transport Canada has identified, and give them opportunity to provide feedback, as well as notifying the public. And then council passes a resolution, and we notify CP, and within 30 days of that, we will achieve whistle cessation. Any questions?
I expect there'll be a few. I'll start a few.
Let's go through next.
Go for it.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that I understand the difference between the safety requirements and the whistle cessation requirements. For the Leduc line, basically we're talking about an extra $12,000 for the cessation requirements only. Is that correct?
Correct, and this is kind of a worst case scenario. There are some, if you actually look at Watt's report, I think on the Leduc line they have 0, but they have what they term long-term upgrades. And these are upgrades that aren't required by, for the 2021 improvements, but are required prior to whistle cessation, or could be required by CP prior to whistle cessation.
Okay. And by far the bulk of that total then is the 50th Avenue items for the safety requirements, and that's for the sidewalk.
For the for the sidewalk and for reconfiguring that stoplight and the timing, we probably have to do a bit of a study if we were moving the stop bar location to be just before the tracks. We want to make sure that we have adequate time for vehicles to move through the intersection.
Okay, thank you. So that, from my perspective, that seems to be decent value for the money. Then we get down to the Bretcher line, and the safety requirements are relatively minor, other than there's the asterisk beside 34th and Wolf Creek Drive both, which means that CP has some items that they have to perform at their cost, right?
That is correct. They're things that the city would not do. It's on their property. It's 100% their infrastructure. We wouldn't have to contribute to them. They're things like widening the pavements. It's supposed to extend 5 meters past the outside of the crossing, those kind of things. They're CP's items.
Okay, thank you. So then that leaves the final substantial item, the $500 and some thousand for whistle cessation requirements for those 2 items. Now, given that we've got a pending development off of the end of that particular street on Wolf Creek Drive, is this something that we're going to have to consider in relatively short order in any event, or is this just strictly for whistle cessation and not necessarily safety alone, or are those 2 items just so related it's irrelevant? Chief Cuddy?
I would say it's very difficult to separate the 2, and that it's hard to imagine, and I've certainly never seen a location that would have the kind of volume of traffic that we're expecting there within an urban municipality that would be controlled by stop signs at a rail crossing. I think the expectation of most residents when you have a high volume road within a city is that you would have the flashing lights and proper preemption built into the infrastructure. So I think you're right that with that development occurring south of it, the short-term solution of a stop sign is probably a little bit less than ideal for the amount of traffic you're going to see there.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, in a roundabout way, that really does suggest that it's more of a perception, a public perception item than a safety item, because on the surface, I mean, to spend over $500,000 to get rid of 15% of the whistles in our community is a bit ridiculous, in my opinion. But if it's safety oriented more, then that's more palatable. And of that $500,000 there's a significant portion that is likely to be approved, or there's a chance that it will be approved for subsidy.
Up to 80% could be approved. I don't have great numbers on the statistics for how many projects Transport Canada is approving, and the remainder of the funds would also be shared by CP.
Thank you. Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I'm looking at a hypothetical scenario with 34th Street with really no crossings, no lights there. If there's ever an accident there, are we leaving ourselves vulnerable legally for not having that at a higher standard of what it is now? If there is a major accident, like by not being attentive to that single one that is really of a lower safety standard than every other crossing in the city?
So just to be clear, the 34th Street crossing actually does meet the regulations.
No, Wolf Creek Drive one.
Sorry, the Wolf Creek Drive one then. I don't think you would be now because the safety regulations are not in place until 2021. I think if there was an accident after 2021, then the municipality could be looked at unfavorably for not having met the at-grade crossing requirements that have been communicated since 2017, that these are coming.
Yeah, the regulations were first introduced in 2014, and then the regulation from Transport Canada was rolled out in 2017, correct?
So not today, but yes, in the future, I think you could.
Councillor Connick?
Well, just for my own clarification here, I had thought I read here that you can get up to 80% of the funding if it's for safety, but not for whistle cessation. So you're suggesting we can get 80% of the 500,000 for whistle cessation, possibly?
Correct, as long as we don't install a stop sign.
Oh, okay.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I can't find a page number on it, but it's in the report, and I thought I read it somewhere else too, that we should be aware that with some of the changes for the 50th Avenue crossing, the actual costs of the reconfiguration could be low cost, price range, or it could be medium or high cost. I wanted to know what your interpretation of that was. Are these real numbers or?
Sure, so that came from Watt's actual report where they tended to categorize things as low, medium, and high. And so those numbers, low being $500, medium being $5,000, high being $500,000. So these by no means are actual construction numbers, these are budgetary numbers. They should be plus or minus 40%.
To follow up though, so it says here it could be low, or it could be medium, or it could be high. So which one are we going with? Because it seemed like in your chart we're going with low. Or am I correct?
Sorry, you're referring to the 50th Ave one by Tim Hortons?
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm not recollecting that particular crossing being low, medium, or high. The Wolf Creek Drive one was definitely ranked as low or high, depending on whether you went with a stop sign or whether you went with the crossings and bells and whistles.
No pages, but it's after 4.0 cost estimations in the actual report, not in your memo. And then it explains what low, medium, and high is, and then it's just the narrative below there. It says the actual cost of reconfiguration on the 50th Avenue in the low cost price range, but additional work may be needed developing the solution, resulting in a medium or a high cost.
Yes, I think I do know what you're talking about. In that case, Watt was considering removing the location of the traffic signals. And if we relocated those, that would definitely increase the cost. However, they did propose to me that they could complete that with simple line painting. How that is contributed by the public, do they actually stop because the line is there, or do they continue on to the tracks? Time will determine.
So I'm just wondering if there's a possibility for us to consider the crossing at Wolf Creek Drive for upgrade or new direction to do so, but not commit and get the grant monies in place prior to the final approval, or subject to, or how would that work? I guess basically, I mean, I see this as important. I don't see it as important to do only for whistle cessation, because I think that is too high a cost for a single intersection, in my opinion. And I don't think one that will be received well by the public. If it's going to be a substantial safety upgrade, given that it is an unusual crossing, especially in an urban setting at the top of a rather steep grade, and it's going to help in that regard, and then we can get 80% of it, then I think that's a little more palatable. Certainly not in favor of doing it only for whistle cessation.
I think in that regards, apologies, in that there you go. In that regards, you could direct administration to pursue with the grant funding for that crossing, and then we could complete construction contingent on achieving the grant funding. That's what you had in mind.
Councillor Douglas?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I feel the same way as you do, Mr. Mayor. 3 trains a day, probably most of them are during the day. It's really not a problem on the Whistler side. My concern is that we need to pursue this to meet the 2021 safety guidelines anyway. Do we not, for that crossing as we increase traffic? Will it not be subject to those regulations?
So I think you could get to a point where the volume necessitates further upgrades. I think what Manager Mitchell is saying is that right now there is some upgrade required to meet the 2021. Option 1 is a stop sign, option 2 is something much more expensive. And you only get 1 grant application. So you can either apply for 80% of the stop sign, which wouldn't actually go through the effort, or 80% of this more substantial project. But you only get 1 shot at it.
Considering that's feeding one of our main areas of growth for the future, I would think we would want a lot more than a stop sign at that crossing to meet the safety requirements. So I would be in favor of looking into that and pursuing those grant applications for the 2021 safety requirements, so that we can meet that with the crossing and the lights.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So, from what I've been hearing, that would be amending motion 1A to, as what directors brought forward, that you could word 1A and adding on an amendment so that you could pursue grant applications subject to approval of grant application. Does that make sense? Is that the same as 1B then? Or adding on the end of 1A, doing the 30 Wolf Creek Drive subject to approval of grant, contingent to grant application? Does that make sense?
It does. I think there's no reason why we can't do more than 1, 2.
No, but I'm adding an amendment to 1A, or adding on to 1A, as directors brought forward, that the Wolf Creek Drive area of concern, putting lights and updating that completely, subject to the success of the grant, the 80% grant application.
Director Thompson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. To Councillor Ross, if the intent is to direct administration to budget or bring forward for budget deliberations the improvements required to achieve full whistle cessation throughout the city, subject to positive grant approval, then that would be motion 1C, with the addition of subject to grant approval.
Okay.
1B speaks to no whistle cessation, do not pursue whistle cessation. So I think 1C is the alternative that you're dealing with.
Because obviously if we do the improvements on Wolf Creek Drive, and that enables full whistle cessation. Anyways, so 1C then. I'd like to make a motion that Council direct administration to bring forward all the recommended improvements for 2020 and or 2021 budget deliberations to enable full whistle cessation once construction is complete. But does that address the contingent based upon budget?
Subject to grant approval.
Subject to grant approval.
Chief Gowdy?
So that definitely gives us clear direction. You don't actually have to worry about the grant approval right now because this just says to bring forward budget deliberations. So what we'll be bringing forward is 500,000 with 400,000 coming from grant. And if that 400,000 doesn't come in, then we don't do the project that year because we don't have the money. So either one is fine. It definitely gives us the direction that you're looking for. And we still have that gate post at the budget time as well. So it works great.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gullikson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought we couldn't apply for grants for whistle cessation.
So you can't, but you can apply for safety requirements, which happen to coincide with the requirements for whistle cessation. And so that's the whole, if we put a stop sign and then made a grant application, they would say, well, no, it already meets the safety requirements. So clearly you're just trying to get whistle cessation. But if you just go straight to that full package, then you're eligible for the grant.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. To follow up on Councillor Gullikson, I guess I would hope that our motion mentions safety in here, because our strategic plan that we're quoting is about the safety of our city. Yes, whistle cessation could be part of it, but we really should have a motion here that we want to accept this safety assessment and follow its recommendations, which might produce whistle cessation, but the safety should be the motivation here, not the whistle cessation, in my opinion.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because that certainly is not my intent to do all of this strictly for whistle cessation. That may be an offshoot of it, and I think that the $12,000 number for the reduction on the Leduc line is a relatively small investment to deter the vast majority of whistles in the city. Because I don't know if it's been council's experience, but I talked to quite a few people about this very item, and pretty apathetic about the whole thing, really. The ones that said, sure, yeah, it would be fine to have less train whistles, especially at odd hours and whatnot. But as soon as you mention that there could be a significant cost involved, the conversation changes in a hurry. So I think to bring this forward, strictly suggesting it's for whistle cessation, is not going to make for any productive interaction with the public, I'll put it that way. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. While I do agree that public safety obviously is the key point, fact of the matter is whistle cessation in this motion is related to the budget dollars. That's why it's higher, it's more expensive than the just simple safety. So if we want to make a political statement, we certainly can do that with our communications. But I think that the motion needs to be very specific, that we're looking at least looking at what a budget to allow for whistle cessation requires. So if that needs to be the motion and not safety. I'm struggling a little bit with the motion. I think I will ultimately support it at this time because it does allow for the greatest options to come forward, but I just want to reiterate the fact that we can change our mind at budget deliberations, and that may happen. I'm going to be very interested to hear what the public feedback is on this. Myself, I'm probably one of those apathetic. I'm pretty neutral on this topic. For the most part. However, I do recognize that this is a significant issue for some people in this community, and so I want that to be reflected in our conversations for sure, and I want to respect that. So, but yeah, I guess that's the only thing I really wanted to bring forward is those 2 points. It is very important whistle cessation stay in the motion, and that we still have an option. You know, just because we say that's what we'd like administration to bring to us during budget doesn't necessarily mean that that's what happens.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. A few points. I'm rather excited, as you alluded to the $12,000 for the Leduc line. I thought that I had heard all kinds of numbers, and that number is very pleasing. My only concern or question is, so the motion as it's put forth now, we talked about it so I guess my concern is I still want to see whistle cessation on the Leduc line, absolutely. I'm just hoping that doesn't get the kibosh if we don't get the grant funding for the $500,000. That's my only concern.
No, we'll present them as 2 separate projects. There'll be whistle cessation and safety improvements on the Brechster line, and whistle cessation and safety improvements on the Leduc line.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I still would want to emphasize that we're using a safety assessment to make all these recommendations. And we're misleading the public that we took all of that information to go to whistle cessation. And we also quoted our strategic plan about safety, because I highlighted that right away at the beginning of the memo, and I thought, we are trying to promote whistle cessation, but we're promoting safety, and a lot of people would argue that those two things do not go hand in hand. So I think that we would be fortunate that as we meet safety regulations, that maybe we will be able to get some of the whistles to stop. But our true motivation here should be the safety of our city.
I think simply by the fact that you've mentioned it and the meeting's being streamed live and with the amount of press here, I think that will be stressed. That this is not the sole purpose of it, is for the cessation of the whistles. So we do have a motion on the floor, and I'll ask our legislative coordinator to correct me. It's number 1C in part, and that reads that council directed administration to bring forward all the recommended improvements for 2020 and or 2021 budget deliberations to enable full whistle cessation once construction is complete. And then there's another portion.
Subject to grant approval.
And finishes up with subject to grant approval. Is the way that the motion was presented. Anything additional? All those in favor? Those opposed? Those unanimous. Manager Mitchell, between you and Director Thompson, it looks like you've got some more work to do. And while we're on transportation, Director Thompson, we've got some considerations for some paving on 50th Avenue between 58th Street and 76th. Would you care to take us through this item, please?
I think I'm handling this one as well. So, recent construction on 58th Avenue, or also known as Highway 12 here in town, has highlighted the fact that this road is looked at by the public as having or requiring a higher level of service than many of the other roads here in town. And so administration has reviewed with the contractor who's completing the 78th Street and 58th Street projects the possibility of extending the mill and pave program between those intersections to complete that whole stretch between 76th intersection and 58th intersection. As a bit of a history, as you probably are all very well aware, in 2018, ATCO Gas went ahead and installed a new gas line under the south side of Highway 12. And they completed that project using horizontal directional drill methods, which led to multiple patches in the highway surface. This year, we did a very similar thing, installing the water line on the north side of the road, and that resulted in several patches to the asphalt surface. Since then, we've received multiple inquiries about the condition of Highway 12, and so during the construction process, I actually met the consultant as well as the contractor on site, and we reviewed the condition of Highway 12, looking for ways that we could do some improvements. And at that time, it was noted that this road is a great candidate for mill and pave. Mill and pave is essentially where you take off the top 2 inches of asphalt and put brand new black asphalt on top, and this allows us to seal the road and protect the base, which in most instances can extend the life of the road up to 15 years. I've included figure 1 on page 2 of the memo, which kind of outlines in green where mill and pave is already planned to be complete as part of the 76th Street and 58th Street intersections. It also shows where the water line and gas line were installed. The area in red highlights what we are proposing adding to the project. Financial implications, so for this project, it will cost approximately $467,000. One of the things that we looked at was we got great pricing in the 2019 Capital Works project. A good portion of that was due to fantastic pricing in asphalt. Just as an anecdote, we had a project which we had priced out in both October and July of this year. Exact same project, exact same contractor. The price in October 2018 was $24 per square meter. The price in July of 2018 was $18 per square meter. So that reflects a 25% decrease in the price of asphalt. So they are good right now. And so looking at that, the Capital Works project was about $900,000 under budget when it was first brought forth to council. At that time, we also highlighted 4 additional projects that we would like to take on as a city. Those 4 additional projects totaled about $500,000. However, one of the directions we received from council was to remove one of them and replace it with that frost heave on 63rd out by Airport Road. However, after discussing that with our consultant, it was confirmed that you really need to do testing for those type of frost heave instances in winter conditions to determine the true extents if you really want to solve it. If we tackled it now, we might get part of it, but not all of it. So administration has elected to bring that one forward to council during the 2020 capital budget deliberations, and as such, it's been removed from the total cost of the 2019 Capital Works project. That leaves us a remaining budget of $471,000, almost $472,000 for the 2019 Capital Works project, which is sufficient to cover the repaving proposed here for Highway 12. If this project is not completed this year, we have highlighted it as a priority that does need to get added to the 10-year capital plan, and we will put it on in the next, probably with prioritization in the next 5 years. Any questions?
Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Well, Highway 12 coming into our city, it showcases our community. I think it should be redone, and it will just make the experience of coming into Lacombe that much nicer. And I think people will feel a little better about the project out west.
Councillor Cock?
So Mr. wanted to make the motion, but I didn't do it. Yeah, absolutely. This road is a main artery. Let's get it done. Council, I support the council authorized administration utilize surplus funds on the 2019 Capital Works project to mill and pave 1.2 kilometers of 50 path as proposed.
Thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I kind of have mixed feelings. I do agree with it is a perception of coming into our community, but on the other hand, if the road and then Thompson was paved, would we be selling more lots there even in these economic times? It's just something of discussion if that same money was applied to that. Would be selling more lots and creating more revenue and tax dollars by creating a better perception in the Wolf Creek of then Thompson Road. In my opinion, should be, if not done this year, be done in 2020 or 2021. So it's just a thought.
Director Thompson or Chief Gotti, can we have an update where we're at? Or progress update in that particular area?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are planning on bringing forward options for paving the Len Thompson Drive this fall. I believe we talked about either September or October for council's consideration.
For 2020 though, or this year?
You'd be bringing it, certainly not this year, but for consideration either, well, at council's direction, it could be done in 2020 or 2021 or a future year as specified by council.
So certainly it's in the works under consideration. Appreciate that update. Councillor Lucia?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I wasn't going to make a motion, but I love it that Councillor Connick thought I was. I had questions about the patches though. Didn't all the patches just get redone? like, because people complained about the patches and then they got redone. And so now, do we not have faith that the patches will last?
That's a very good question. So the patches that were installed initially were never meant to be the permanent patches. They were gravel, rocks were getting thrown up, so they put some cold mix down to keep the rocks down, and that's kind of what people saw and were really concerned were the permanent patches. The reason that it was delayed in putting those permanent patches in place was that these were very deep holes, up to 3+ meters, and so we were concerned about settlement, and so leaving a little additional time before paving helped mitigate that risk of settlement and future potholes in all of those locations. Now that those paving patches have been done, definitely the calls have slowed down, but there is still that perception of when you come into town and you see a road that's full of patches, mixed with the fact that that is an aging road. We inherited it from Alberta Transportation in 2012, I want to say, 2012. And so no major upgrades have been completed since, and none are currently in the 10-year capital plan. To keep that road in good working order, it's a substantial road. It was built by Alberta Transportation, so something like 12 inches of asphalt. And so that would be a very costly rebuild for us down the future. So if we can keep it in good repair now, that will prevent those massive costs down the road.
So, Manager Mitchell, given that this is a 1,200 meters of highway, provincial highway basically, within our city limits, occurs between two current intersection projects, would the final lift be all done at once? So this is going to be a seamless end result? Because that's, quite honestly, that's some of the challenges that we get from the public is a lot of patchwork stuff, which I know happens in every city, but it's not taken well. So I want to know if the end result is, would that be the goal is to do the final lift of the entire project, both the 76th Street and 58th Street intersections and the 50th Avenue portion between all at once?
Yes, mostly. It would be the goal to complete it with the 58th Street intersection, and then the 76th Street intersection, because there are new lanes being constructed, it's being done in 2 lifts. And the second lift, again, to allow for settlement and that kind of thing, is being deferred till next year. So that 76th Street intersection where they're putting in new lanes will still have some work done in the following year. And again, that's just to allow for expected settlement that occurs when you do these kind of things, so that we'll have a nice road top surface for the next 20 years.
And identify any problem spots and have those fixed prior to the final lift?
Correct.
Anyone else? So given the company that's involved in this, I'll once again, to be consistent, disclose that my brother is employed by Border Paving, has no direct relationship with operations or Fred here whatsoever, but you all know, just so you all know anyway. Okay? Do we need to reread the motion, or no? Is everybody good? Councilor Hooch, were you going for your mic? No? All right. So, reread it, or no? We're good? All those in favor? That was unanimous too, thank you. By all means, we can have a recess. It is now 7 o'clock, so we will take a break after a couple hours and perhaps give the press an opportunity to talk to anyone if they so choose, and we will reconvene at 7:10. Perfect.
I appreciate the recess. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. It's 7:12. We'll reconvene and we'll pick up our final item under new business, I believe. Under council and legislative is discussion on property tax incentives with respect to Bill 7 of the Municipal Government Amendment Act. And I'll ask that our Chief Administrative Officer take us through this item, please.
So Bill 7 allows municipalities to offer tax incentives on the municipal portion of taxation, not the education portion, I should be specific there. You can, through bylaw, you can identify what criteria would be required for an industry to be eligible for this sort of tax deferral process for anywhere from 0 to 15 years, although you can actually, there's a mechanism for renewal, so you in theory could have 0 to 100% deferral indefinitely if you kept renewing that process. So the idea being that this would allow municipalities to attract different industries to their municipality. And of course, we ourselves are familiar with developers requesting the use of a tax deferral mechanism for incentivizing development. So obviously there's some concerns with this. Number one, this really pits municipality against municipality. It doesn't necessarily bring new development and new activity into the province of Alberta. It just potentially moves it around and forces municipalities to compete against their regional partners to get development that may have otherwise come anyway. And so I can think of an example of, say, a Walmart coming to Black Falls and Macomb and shopping around to see who's going to give them the better deal. When really they might come to the area anyway, that sort of thing. So Mayor Bill Given of Grande Prairie has highlighted some of these same concerns. Of course, there's the additional concern of your existing businesses seeing you defer taxes on a new business when they've been delivering their taxes for year after year to the municipality. Mayor Given really highlights the potential for this to cause inequity between municipalities, and that those municipalities that are already in a position to offer tax incentives can do so and further entrench their advantage to the disadvantage of those that maybe aren't able to offer those tax incentives. Now, he has really highlighted this and sort of drawn it between rural and urban municipalities. One of the things that I think often surprises people outside of the municipal government realm is that rural municipalities actually are typically much better off financially than their urban counterparts. And so whether you choose Macomb County or Red Deer County, due to the nature of linear assessment, the rural municipalities are actually much better off financially. And so the linear assessment inequity is that linear infrastructure like power lines, pipelines, and major designated industrial property is all assessed and given to the municipality of residents. And so in that case, obviously, mostly that's to rural municipalities, and then urban municipalities are left to only collect taxation off the properties within their jurisdiction. So often urban municipalities are impacted heavily by what's called designated industrial properties, so like major, for us, like a petrochemical plant as an example, but we don't collect any taxation on it. So here in Macomb, we've got a great relationship with Macomb County. They contribute, and that's great, but many other municipalities don't have that kind of relationship, and so this could actually further deepen the divide. Mayor Given also goes on to highlight a few instances where rural municipalities have specifically completed developments on the periphery of urban municipalities to take advantage of the population there and also hem them in from future growth. So the example he uses, maybe I use that, is is Gasoline Alley, which, you have all this development and there's some that say, well, maybe that development wouldn't have occurred had it been forced to pay the land prices and develop within the city of Red Deer. But I think most people could look at it and say, well, even if 60% of it occurred within the urban municipality, that would be much better for the people of Red Deer than on the periphery. So with those concerns in mind, Mayor Given has requested that other communities would share, if you share these concerns or others, that you would pass on that message to the local MLA. We are recommending, after our review, that we do recommend that you would have some of those same concerns, or expect you would have some of those same concerns, and we want to make that known to our local MLA, Ron Orr, through a letter from the mayor.
Thanks, Chief Gowdy. So I'm expecting, like many of you, when this first came out, that I saw this as a very positive move and that it was going to spur on some additional development and whatnot, and generally be of assistance to municipalities. But the way that it is now, I really don't think that that's going to be the genuine outcome of it. I think it's going to be basically hitting one municipality against the next, whether it's urban or rural is kind of irrelevant. The end result is the same, and wherever a particular business can or industry can find basically the rock bottom best deal is probably where they're going to go. And initially I saw this as more of a provincial mandate to attract major industry and whatnot back to the province in general, where they chose to call home specifically, not necessarily as important as just getting them here back to the province and getting our province back to work in general. So I happen to be on board with a lot of the thoughts that Mayor Given had and certainly endorse it, but looking for some direction from council. Is your thoughts on the effect of Bill 7 as it's proposed currently? Councilor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I would echo a large part of what you say, so that I wouldn't go through that all again. I do find this letter to be very enlightening. I mean, it isn't the case that everybody has the same relationship as us. I totally respect the concept of Bill 7. I was quite excited when I first heard it. I mean, it's really giving municipalities more ability, like, to deal with, local issues, right? And I love that. I think that is hopefully a good indication of where this province is going in the future, so I'd like to see more of that. That being said, like any bill, they're never perfect, or typically not perfect when they first come out, and I think that this is a great opportunity for us to give some feedback, in regards to this specific, legislation. So I would be in full support of a letter going from this council in regards to Bill 7.
Thank you. Would you?
Yeah, I guess if that requires a motion, a proper worded motion, that somebody's going to help me find. Is that it there? Yeah. Okay.
No, go. It should come up.
Maybe look for
At the top.
Yeah.
I'm not on the right
It's
page.
better, that one's better.
There we go. Yes, that council direct administration to draft a letter to MLA Ron Orr outlining concerns with proposed Bill 7.
Thank you, appreciate that. Councilor Hoekstra, did you have something additional? Anyone else? Councilor Gullickson.
Well, I found this fascinating too. I thought it might be a great opportunity, like Councilor Hibbs, for municipalities to do something special. In fact, in a way, we've already done this, did we not? Very similar. It wasn't exactly taxes, but I mean, we're in that business already. My friend down the way giggles, she knows what I'm talking about. But I like the idea of competing with other municipalities. I think it's great, and I hope they can fix this and give us an opportunity to do that, because I think when you're out there and you have lots to offer, it's not only financial assistance that will bring people, everything, including a paved Highway 12 coming into the community to make it look good. So I think we'll have an opportunity down the road and let they fix the bill and get it to something that's a little more workable.
I guess a person can compare the similarities and differences to this to the nth degree. I guess for me, the biggest difference is that the path that we chose to do on a rather recent decision was to incentivize some development with the expectation that it was going to have a significant return. This one here, I mean, when it's pushed, it's basically going to go to 15 years, and we're looking at a substantially shorter one. So I guess the differences are significant to me, but perhaps not to everyone. Anything else before we consider the motion? All good? All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you. I expect we'll have that letter before too awfully long, because it needs to be in relatively soon to have, if it's going to have any meaningful impact. Okay, very good. So, once again, we did I tended to jump around a little bit with the order of things. Are we down to reports, or will we omitted any items? All good? Bring mine up. I'll mix things up a little bit, and I can start off here if I can find my report. I think it's too substantial in length. One item, speaking of our neighbors in the county, I was out on June 21st to their very well done event for the Lacombe County Farm Safety Day. I think that's going to be quite a hit, especially with school children go out there and get involved in some fun activities out there and spend the day at the county learning something about safety, so it's time well spent for sure. I had an opportunity to go to the Patoka Stampede a couple of occasions, one with an event hosted by Landrex that Councillor Hibbs and myself attended. It was sponsored by a group interested in working with municipalities on municipal waste. Certainly enjoyable day, and met some interesting people with some different types of solutions for waste-related items, which I certainly enjoyed talking to them about. I think it was time well spent. The next one I want to bring up, just because, so joined the Kay family for the picture taking opportunity, photo opportunity there, and to let them know that council appreciates their involvement in our community and their sponsorship. And it was quickly brought to my attention by some other businesses that there's been far less done for businesses that perhaps donated as much, if not more, towards our facilities. And I will say publicly that the same thing that I told them was how things were done in the past. I'm not necessarily inclined to either defend nor endorse. This is the way that we do it now, and if there's some businesses that feel that they were disadvantaged, we'd be more than happy to do what we can to make it right. But this was not intended to be one-sided or endorsing one business specifically. This was something that came about during this particular council's term. I felt that that was appropriate. I was asked to go there and do this, and I thought it was appropriate. So I don't think it needs defending, and happy that we were able to promote another business here in our community. Patoka Stampede, as I said, I went there for a couple of events. I had an opportunity to go to the mayor's luncheon hosted by Mayor Bonnet there, and it's always a good time after the parade. Some suggested the parade was perhaps better attended than other years even. I don't know if I necessarily agree, but there was a lot of people there. It was fun. It was a nice break in the weather. Did have an opportunity to present Premier Kenny with some of our local Five of Diamonds products, both some beer from Landman Brewery and some fishing lures, and he was pretty excited with that because I think that he enjoyed making the videos that featured some of the products from here in Lacombe, and we appreciate he and Minister Nixon for their involvement there. I think that went over well. Canada Day festivities. There was an awful lot of people out to the free breakfast sponsored by the North Business Group there. Certainly a pleasure to go there and get served. It's been a couple of years since I've donated my time there, although I was certainly involved financially with the business and happy to do so. Told there was about 1,600 or 1,700 people there at meals that they served, so that was good to see. But free breakfast seems to sell well, so. The Canada Day celebrations, I think, went over well. Always nice to see everyone out for some festivities kicked off at the Lacombe Legion. Pretty well received, I'd say. And a couple other meetings and whatnot there, and finish up with an MPC meeting on July 3rd. That's really all that I had. Relatively light report for this time around. Who's up next? Councillor Hillickson? Go ahead.
June 23rd, we had...
Mike, please.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. June 23rd, attended a Lacombe Days meeting. We're finalizing the details for the parade, drive-in movie, and other events for the celebration. On the 25th, at a library board meeting, HR discussion and issues regarding paid services with the city, and I believe those have been addressed, so thank you very much, Director Jupe. And then on June 26th, the waste management tour. This tour was very informative, and I was glad I wore safety shoes so I could go in. But it did indicate to us what we were doing wrong and what's right with recycling. And I hope to hear more from them and work with them at some of the farmers markets coming up to enlighten our citizens on what can be done with our recycle. And then from then on, it's just Canada Day with, same as the mayor, at the Lacombe flag raising and MPC meeting also.
Thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I was just basically continuing Lacombe Days meetings and planning. We are still seeking more volunteers to help out, and even if it's only for a few hours at a certain day that works for them, we would greatly appreciate more volunteers. And just to power groups between Black Falls and Lacombe, we set up the fireworks for Black Falls, just to kind of working together with them that we're going to do the fireworks for Lacombe. So went very well. So it was very cool, but it went well. And that's all I have.
Thank you. So the call out for volunteers, we utilized the city social media as well.
We have our own volunteer night, and we went out through social media and called past volunteers. Other years we had 14, 18, but this year we only had 5. But the names for it, we've recontacted people in the past, but it's just, like I say, if there's even just help to set up, say, for one event or a few hours, it doesn't mean you can volunteer for the whole 4 days. If somebody can provide 3 or 4 hours at a certain time period, a certain day, we would greatly appreciate it.
No, for sure. Has the committee utilized the services?
I think Roseanne has contacted the volunteer link. I'm not positive, but I think she's going to reach out to them again. So it's just in the summer, it is very difficult to get volunteers. And we've discussed over the last few years of even possibly we discussed moving Lacondius to June just because, for example, bands trying to get bands for the parade, they're usually at international competitions in Europe or the States or somewhere. It's a real challenge trying to get even floats into the parade because of competitions you go to international competitions with the bands, and whether it be Europe or the States. And so it is very challenging. It's families are gone. There's some holidays with their families. So it's the ones that come to Lacombe are coming to see the event, not to help put it on. So it's it is.
No, I have no doubt that there are some challenges, but if you can reach a little different audience, why not? I would encourage you to get a hold of Gavin. I assume that he's away for holidays for a day or two, but you can certainly pass your concerns on to Director Juke, and I'm sure they'd be happy to put some together. This community has got a pretty good volunteer pool, and they always seem to come through and pull off some pretty great events. So if you can contact a few different people by doing that, I would certainly encourage you to do so.
Thank you.
Councillor Hoefstra?
Can I ask a question first?
Certainly you can. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Just to, in regards to volunteering, who do they get a hold of? Like, what's the process there?
Just reply through info@lacombe.ca and our community responds like within the same day. So it's just info@lacombe.ca.
You like that kind of response time? Wonderful. Councillor Hoefstra?
Thanks, Mark Creasy. I don't have a written report this time because I didn't have a meeting in the last 2 weeks, which is delightful. But I did go to Music in the Park on Wednesday last week, and it was in the church, but what a great event. And I just want to commend the volunteers involved there and how lucky Lacombe is to have that weekly music event. I also have been meeting one-on-one with some citizens, but it's been a good 2 weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I would like to sort of reiterate what Councillor Gullickson said about the waste tour. Eye-opening, promising, looking forward to more development in that area. So that's at least somewhat favorable. I did also want to comment on the Canada Day celebrations here in town. It's really a pity that the weather just turned like that at the afternoon. But prior to that point, it was excellent. Like, so many smiley faces. There were a couple of new things. It was a really enjoyable day. I really liked that. It was a good ceremony at the Legion as well. I did really appreciate that. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention was, where did we go here? The parade, that was the last one. The Ponoka Stampede Parade. So of course our lovely mayor was in that, but also we had an actual Lacombe vehicle in it, which was great actually. Like, I had gotten feedback last year that why weren't we in the parade? Well, we were, but maybe not that obvious. But so much good feedback like during the parade, like, hey, Lacombe! Like, there's a lot of people there from this community, and they really like seeing us in the parade. So I would definitely encourage us to keep doing that. And then I also was talking with a counselor from Rocky Mountain House in the staging area, and also just wanted to pass on, they are doing a solid waste management audit, or whatever you want to call it, approximately the same time that we are. So just, it might be interesting to have a look, so I just thought I'd mention that. So yeah, otherwise it was a fantastic event, fabulous weather, saw a fabulous counselor in the crowd, so
I appreciate that report, and I'm sure that everyone would be more than happy to share the results of their solid waste survey and work in conjunction with us. Appreciate that. And Canada Day was also a special day for you, was it not?
for me.
Yes.
Oh.
Congratulations.
Yes, it was. It was 19 years for Brad and I.
All right. Councillor Connick.
Nothing to report this time, I'll get it next time.
And I think we've got some report from our CAO on monthly significant events.
Well, you may not have noticed, but it has become a meetingly report. So there is not that many significant events since the last report. So I can answer anything that's on there, but it was business as usual, focused on the city's business.
So that's why it was so conveniently scrolled up to cut off the monthly significant reports title. on that page. Very interesting. But yes, we were paying attention and noticed that these were becoming more frequent. That's a good thing. So I think that's all the reports that we have. We can accept them as presented. Councillor Goldson?
I'll make that motion.
Very good. All those in favor? Thank you. Is there any other business prior to in-camera items? If not, Councillor Conick? Sorry.
I'm trying to hog all the motions. Motion moving camera.
Thank you. Motion to move in camera at 7:37. All those in favor? Thank you. Matt, if you can just let us know when you've got